Good evening and welcome to our Rural Support and Wellbeing webinar this evening. I'm Nikki Rattenbury, a Trading Standards Officer for Heart of the South West Trading Standards, and will be facilitating the webinar this evening. Obviously, it's being funded via the Future Farm Resilience Programme. Tonight's webinar will be focusing mainly on animal welfare and in particular welfare of animals in transport. We've just got a couple of things for housekeeping. I'm sure everyone's really up to scratch with all of the webinar things this evening, but there's only a couple of us online, and if others join, that would be amazing. But if you do want to ask any questions or you would like to, you can either put your hand up, you can add it in the chat facility, or you can just unmute yourself and you can just join us. Both of our speakers this evening are very happy to have interaction and take any queries or questions that you might have. The other thing I just need to let you know as a disclaimer is that the evening will be being recorded. If you would prefer your name not to be shared in the presentation, then if you could just email separately to Luke, he can obviously have that admitted from it. Or equally, there's a telephone number there. So yeah, rather than hang on any, we can introduce our first speaker for this evening. It's Florence Langley, and she is a government technical advisor for the Welfare and Transport team at the Animal and Plant Health Agency. We've also got Sam Younger, one of our Trading Standards officers, who will be speaking afterwards. Florence, whenever you're ready, if you would like to join us, that would be amazing.
Yeah, hi, I'll just share my presentation now, get it up and going. Here we are. Oh. Brilliant. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes, I can. I hope everyone else can.
Brilliant, that's perfect. Good to know that I've started. So yes, as Nikki was saying before, I am Florence Langley, and I work for the Welfare and Transport team for the Animal and Plant Health Agency, which is a agency that works under DEFRA. And I work as part of the Centre of International Trade within the Animal and Plant Health Agency. So just to give you a little bit of background of what I'm planning on talking about today is we're going to really be focusing in on transporter authorization. So what is a transporter authorization, types of transporter authorization, what are the requirements for one, your documentation that's needed, and then also talk about the application process. We're going to talk a little bit about compliance with the welfare and transport regulations and how that relates to individual transporter authorizations. And I'll finally end with a couple of additional links for further and for places for you to go to for further information. So I just wanted to get started with introducing you to the pieces of legislation which I work under in my job, and these are the primary pieces of legislation that welfare and transport, the primary piece of legislation that we work under when we're looking at welfare and transport. Apologies for that. So I think the first thing to point out to everyone here is the fact that welfare and transport legislation is a devolved piece of legislation. So that means it's a separate piece of legislation for England, Scotland and Wales. Obviously, for the individuals probably on this call, you're probably going to be focusing mainly on the welfare and transport order for England. At the top, we have the Council Regulation EC number 1/2005, and this is a retained piece of legislation from when we were part of the EU. And this contains a lot of the regulations which individuals need to comply with when transporting animals. So when we're talking about transporter authorizations, this is something that is required under Council Regulation EC number 1/2005, as listed at the top. And this regulation is implemented through the Welfare of Animals in Transport England order. And I've just got a link there at the bottom for the for sort of some more information about Welfare in Transit, which is the gov.uk site, and that is a site that is updated fairly regularly, and we've just recently had a huge project to update that site, so hopefully if you need any more information, lots of information should be available there.
Florence, I'm really sorry. Somebody's just said on the chat that they're having a trouble hearing you. I can hear you really clearly. I'm not sure if everyone else is the same. Is anyone else having trouble hearing?
Mine's fine for me. I've just
Yeah.
put in the chat about that they should be able to turn up the volume on their computer or device.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm hoping that should work for them.
Okay. Sarah, if you're able to, if that has worked and you could give us a sort of a thumbs up or anything just to let us know that you're sorted, that would be great. And then Florence can continue.
I can't seem to see where I can turn it up to.
So, are you working on a laptop or is it a phone
laptop.
or so
So
all
along the very
onto the
top
volume
bar,
right there at the bottom, and that's on maximum. So
along the very top, I know on mine where I've got F3 and F2, F3 makes mine go louder. It's got a microphone with a plus. Does yours have the same?
no, it looks like a light.
Oh,
Doesn't look like a microphone.
Oh yeah, that's normally F4. Mine looks like a bit of a light. F5 and F6. So one of them might.
Looks so there's like a volume thing on F11.
yeah, try that one then.
Yeah.
It's different for all different computers.
Let's come up, press F11 to exit the screen. I don't want to do that.
Oh, try not do that. We're not that boring, I promise you. Don't leave it yet. Give us a chance.
I can't see anywhere else.
Can you hear us okay, Sarah? Is it just Florence that you can't hear, or
no, it's both of you so far. I can hear it, but I'm sort of leaning forward to hear it.
Have you got I'll just chip in here on the bottom right of your computer screen. Can you see a speaker along the bottom right corner of your screen?
I did have, but the screen's all gone on your screen now, and I can't.
So if you tap the F11 key again, that should exit the full screen mode that you're in. Is that restored the speaker?
I mean, the loudspeaker at the bottom, I went on earlier before I actually sent the message, and it says I'm up to 100% on that. So.
Maybe on the speakers occasionally my speakers get filled up with a bit of dust. I don't know. I guess, Florence, are you able to possibly just move the microphone slightly closer to you and just check whether that works all right?
I'll just muddle on. You carry on.
Sorry, we couldn't help you any more than that.
No, that's all right.
No.
Okay, Florence, if you're happy to continue, that would be amazing.
Yeah, no worries. I'll try and speak as loudly and as clearly as I can, so hopefully you can still get something from the presentation. If not, it might be worth just having a quick watch over the recording, as you might be able to sort out some of the volume issues. I'm not quite sure. But yeah, so obviously this slide is just showing us a little bit of the legislation that I work under, and probably all the individuals and trading standards work under, and also just providing you just with that link at the bottom, which can provide you some really useful guidance if you're looking for it. So I think one of the most important slides is probably this one of my whole presentation, which is what is a transporter authorization, and why is it important for you as farmers or as individuals to know about what a transporter authorization is. So under the legislation of 2005, anyone transporting any live vertebrate, someone's got a hand up, I think.
Yeah, sorry, no, I was just going to chip in. If the lady's still having trouble, I just tried it because I didn't know whether it would work. If she clicks the three little dots at the top of the screen that says more, and clicks language and speech, you can turn on automatically generated captions, and that will.
Oh, that's a good idea.
That'll do text to speech for as best it can.
Thank you, Robin.
That's all right, no worries.
Has that worked, Sarah? Are you able to do that, or?
Sorry, Robin's voice was even fainter, to be honest with you. So I didn't catch any of it. You just carry on and I'll muddle on.
Okay, no worries, Sarah. Apologies for the technical issues you're having. Yeah, so in terms of with transporter authorizations, and in anyone transporting any live vertebrate animals in or through GB on journeys of over 65 kilometres as part of an economic activity must hold a valid transporter authorization, which is issued by the UK. Now, that seems like quite a complex thing, but when we're talking, I think one of the key definitions that we need to clear up is when we're talking about economic activity, that is in relation to the transport of any animals which is undertaken as part of a business or commercial activity which aims at achieving financial gain, whether it be direct or indirect, for a person or company involved with the transport. So that essentially means that as farmers, if you are transporting animals over 65 kilometres, you will be engaging in some sort of economic activity and therefore will require a transporter authorization. I've got a couple more examples of people who will need a transporter authorization. So any commercial hauliers that you use if you're transporting your animals, they will require a transporter authorization, and they are also used across other sectors of animal transportation. So, for example, within the pet animal trade, individuals who are transporting pet animals in relation to economic activity would also require a transporter authorization. So it's not just a thing for farmers, it is a thing for everyone, which sometimes is important to clarify. Yeah. So when we're talking about transporter authorizations, we have two different types of transporter authorizations. So in the majority of cases that I imagine for the journeys that you will be doing as farmers, you will probably only be requiring a type 1 transporter authorization. And that is for journeys which are over 65 kilometres and up to and including 8 hours in duration. Don't ask me why it goes from kilometres to hours in determining journey lengths. That is the way the legislation's written. I didn't have any control of that. And then we do have a second type of transporter authorization, which is for journeys that are classified as long journeys, which is for all journeys over 65 kilometres which exceed 8 hours. I think it's important to note that if you have a type 2 transporter authorization, you do not need an additional type 1 transporter authorization, as a type 2 transporter authorization would also cover transporters who undertake short journeys as well. So when we're looking at transporter authorizations, these are the requirements that are needed for you to gain one. So we have different requirements for the different types of transporter authorizations. So the two main requirements that we look at, along with additional paperwork that APHA asks you to fill out, are certificates of competence and vehicle approval certificates. So we ask for certificates of competence for what traditional farming species will probably be utilising their transporter authorisation for. So, for example, cattle, sheep, pigs, goats, horses, and poultry. So you will note that for type 1 authorisation, what is required is certificates of competence. You do not require a vehicle approval if you are wanting a type 1 transporter authorization. However, in order to get a type 1 transporter authorization, you want to transport the species listed below, you will require a certificate of competence. So just talking a bit about what a certificate of competence is, I've just got here a little example of what a certificates of competence look like. This is what we class as the block format certificate that we see. So usually when you go and get your certificate of competence, you will they'll send you through a more, how do I put it, more like nice looking certificate. Maybe you'll get a little card with your name on, but when we're looking at for filling out the transporter authorization requirements, we need it under the legislation that we work under to be in this block format. So as saying, the certificates of competence, they are there to act as a proof that an individual is competent to act as an attendant or driver for animals for the intended journey of the animal. So APHA do not issue certificates of competence. It is actually designated bodies under DEFRA which are independent from APHA who undertake this assessment, and we've got the 3 bodies that are designated by DEFRA listed below, which is Sitting Guilds or NPTC, LANTRA, and First for Sport, which is only for horse transporters only. And I believe if you just Google these company names, their sites do come up, and you can access, and they have a lot of teams who are more than willing to answer questions, and they can provide you with guidance regarding if you've got any further questions about certificates of competence. So I've just got a little thing here on vehicle approval certification. Again, vehicle approval certification is only required if you want to gain a Type 2 transporter authorization. And this vehicle approval certificate is basically is where a vehicle gets inspected and approved by an independent body, and that basically ensures that it is fit under the 2005 regulation in order to undertake long journeys. There is a specific set of requirements which, if I was to go through, we'd be here till I think tomorrow afternoon. So but the people who undertake the vehicle approval certifications have all this knowledge, and again, these bodies are designated by DEFRA. And these bodies are the NSF and Logistics. And again, I believe a quick Google will provide you with the websites of these companies. And I've just got here on the right a little example of a vehicle approval certificate, so you can see what kind of information is supplied and what kind of information we receive about your vehicle from a vehicle approval certificate. And here is probably something that you're all wanting to see, which is what a transporter authorization looks like. And here we just get to see an example of the information that is shown. Just to clarify, though, under 2005, it is a requirement if you have a transporter authorization that you carry it with you, essentially, or a copy of it with you, and that is able to be presented to a competent authority, so APHA or your local authority if requested. That is a requirement of it, and as you can see, one of the other important things to point out is that the transporter authorization has a valid from and expires on date. So a transporter authorization is valid for a 5-year long period. I believe it's 5 years. I'm now doubting myself. But a 5-year long period, in which case you will then need to renew your transporter authorization. So how to apply for a transporter authorization. So I've got a web address right at the top, an email address, which is for the WIT team at apha.gov.uk. APHA is responsible for the issuing of transporter authorizations. So if you're aware of any other company saying that they can give you a transporter authorization, that is incorrect. It is only APHA who can issue transporter authorizations. So how to apply? Probably the best way to do that is to email the WIT team and say that you would like to apply for a transporter authorization, either a Type 1 or Type 2 transporter authorization. And they will send you through an application pack which will have all the forms that you need to fill out. The Welfare and Transport team are really lovely, and they'll be more than happy to help you with your forms if you have any questions or queries about the information that's provided. Also in that application pack, we do send out an FAQ document, which will hopefully provide some guidance if you do have any further queries. So within that application pack, you will need to provide the following documents when applying for transporter authorization, and this is solely for road transport, as I imagine this is probably the only sort of mode of transport that we'll be looking at. So you'll be given a application form which will collect a lot of your details, and you'll also be asked for certificates of competence if applicable. So if you're transporting for those species that were listed on the previous slide. And you will be again asked for that specific block format that I showed you previously for those certificates of competence. For a type 2, then you'll have there's a different application form. You'll also be asked to fill out a contingency plan and asked to provide the certificates of competence and vehicle approval as applicable for the different types of forms. So I just wanted to add a quick notice of some things that, that we notice, which is that it's important to keep us up to date and the WIT team up to date if you have a transporter authorization of any changes that you have. So for example, if you're moving house, if you're changing your email address, if you're changing your contact details, or if you want to, let's say that your transporter authorization is only valid for sheep and cattle, something like this, but you want to now transport goats, you have to contact the WIT team and update us of any changes that you want to make. And within the legislation, that has to be done within 15 working days from the date in which you made the changes. The WIT team work at quite a fast pace, so don't worry. Just make sure that you contact us within those 15 days. And also just to point out is when you get a transporter authorization, part of what you sign on your application form is to say that you are aware of the legislation, the 2 pieces of legislation that I've got listed below, and that it's your responsibility to ensure that you comply with all necessary aspects of those pieces of legislation. So just finally, just a little bit about non-compliance with the welfare and transport regulations, which is probably quite big and scary for everyone. But we're not out here to try and catch you out or things like that. But this is just to let you know that if you are found to be non-compliant with the welfare and transport regulations, APHA, as the regulator for transporter authorizations, can take action on those transporter authorizations, and this can be done in various ways. We can send advisory letters, so provide advice and guidance of how you didn't comply with the regulation, and provide links for guides which can help you to ensure compliance in the future. In severe cases, we can suspend or revoke a transporter authorization, so that would prevent an individual from being able to carry out journeys whereby a transporter authorization is required. And we can also add conditions to a transporter authorization. So for example, if there's issues with different things, we can definitely add conditions to a transporter authorization which can limit the extent to which you can transport animals. Also to highlight that we work in tandem very closely with the local authorities. So my partner's here in the heart of the Southwest trading standards, and they work and they are responsible for enforcement action. So they're usually the people who you'll see who will come out if there ever is a concern with welfare and transport. And the local authorities are responsible for the enforcement action, and they can issue warning notices, fines, and in cases it can move forward with prosecution depending on the case itself. And it's just important to note that those two actions don't take place in silo. We do work together, and we do try and take action as a whole in order to ensure total compliance with the welfare and transport regulations. So finally, we've just got some further links and information. So if you're not so au fait with technology and you don't want to email the welfare and transport team, we do have a postal address which you can contact them on here, which is in Carlisle, a telephone number which is for the APHA's central customer contact team. If you get through to them and would like to just speak to the WIT team, just mention that when you get through to our central customer contact team, and they will most likely pass you through to the welfare and transport team as requested, and they can take some calls. And then finally, again, I've just got links to that that gov.uk site, which is a bit more information. But yeah, that's everything. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Florence. I will just, we haven't got anything in the chat, but however, I just will give it a couple of minutes if that's all right, just to see if anyone has any questions or anything they'd like to ask, really. Oh, I think Sam has put her hand up there.
There's always something. Sorry, Florence.
No worries.
I just have a couple of things. So first of all, is there a minimum or a maximum amount of animals that are included in the authorizations? So so they could have just a couple of sheep on a lorry and still need to perfect?
Yeah, so it's not the number of animals. If you are just transporting one animal and it's relating to an economic activity, and it's over that 65 kilometers, then you will need a transporter authorization.
Wonderful, thank you. And also with the authorization, does it matter if they're driving with a car, or maybe like a 4x4 and a trailer, or a lorry? Does that make any difference?
No, it doesn't. I mean, obviously, it will be the individual's responsibility as holder of a transporter authorization to make sure that that vehicle, whatever vehicle that they use, fulfills the requirements of 2005. You know, like prevents suffering, all that. There's specific requirements, so it would be down to that individual. But we don't, unless it's the only inspection of vehicles that occur would be if an individual would want a Type 2 transporter authorization, but that can be a vehicle approval certificate can be issued on a trailer, it can be issued on a lorry. It really doesn't. There's really no variation between size of vehicles, if that makes sense, as long as they comply with 2005.
Wonderful, thank you. I think that was all the questions I came up with.
I
think it's like us in a minute.
No, I forgot to add it to my presentation, but just to let everyone know that there's no cost to getting a transporter authorization. I'm not quite sure if there's the documents, so the certificates of competence and vehicle approval certificates. I believe there is a cost related to getting those two documents, but for getting a transporter authorization in themselves, there is no cost for the individual to get one.
Brilliant,
if that
thank you,
makes
Florence.
sense. But yeah.
No, that does make sense. So yeah, the actual authorization is free, but because at the start of this, when it first came in, I think you could even get your certificate of competence for free. People were holding them, holding them at venues. But I think you're right. I think now there might be a small cost.
We're not related to those bodies, so I couldn't give people exact figures of how much things cost or anything. But I know for certain that certificates of competence don't cost anything there because the APHA deliver them. But yeah,
I think if they wanted to find out costs, either is contacting NFU or someone like that. One of those kind of organisations are generally offering out these. They do times where they offer out the certificate of competence courses. So
brilliant.
Yeah, that's my understanding. So hopefully they could provide. They'll provide information of the next one that's coming up and also costings and things like that.
Brilliant.
So that'd be good.
If my presentation is done, am I okay to drop off now, just so I'm not dropping off in the middle of Samantha's
Of course you
presentation.
are. I just had one really small quick question before
Yeah.
you go, because I know you're in a rush to get away. But it was just to say, if a farmer was wanting to book a haulier because obviously these days a lot of farmers do tend to use haulage companies and things, because I think of costs, it's just cheaper than sort of doing it themselves. Is there any way of them checking whether the haulier that they're planning to use has got this certificate of competence and their authorization? We as local authorities used to have that at Ames as a way of doing it, but I just wondered if a farmer themselves, there's any sort of database or anything that they can look at.
We do have there is a published list, and it's a requirement that we publish a list of all type 2 transporters, and that's available on the gov.uk website at the link that I shared previously.
Oh, okay.
In terms of type 1 transporter authorizations, I'm not sure if there's a public way of checking for those individuals. However, I would ask the farmer to request a certificate, the transporter authorization certificate, and the transporter should be fairly willing to send that out to people to prove that they can carry out a transporter that they are authorized to transport. If an individual does have any concerns over if an individual does have or have not a transporter authorization, they can always email into the Welfare and Transport team, and they'll be more than happy to assist in settling any concerns that an individual may have regarding if an individual does have or doesn't have a transporter authorization.
Because this would also involve equestrian transporters, isn't it? Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, so if you want to, I think for type 1 transporter authorizations, your best bet is to ask the individual for a copy of their transporter authorization, which I don't see why an individual would not want to give that out, or to contact the Welfare and Transport team for additional information. Yeah, Naomi?
Hi, sorry, Florence. I've just thought of something.
No worries.
Would it apply to charities who are transporting, well, mainly dogs, like rehoming dogs? You know, they could argue that they're not actually making any money out of it, but yet it's not their own, they're not necessarily their own pets, are they? So if they were using like a scenario, I think of if they had their own vehicle, but they were transporting a number of dogs to a centre or to their new homes, then would it apply then?
So obviously, I think the thing to bear in mind is obviously we have the 65-kilometre limit. So I'm not, charities might only deliver within a small area. So I think that's just important to bear in mind to start with. But additionally, when we're looking at the definition of economic activity, it's both like direct or indirect. So from my opinion, a charity, if they're transporting animals to rehome, they are, because that act of rehoming will generate some sort of income for the charity. It's not necessarily going to be a profit, but it will be something. People usually do pay an adoption fee, or they might charge a fee for dropping the dog off, for example. Then I would say that would be classified under economic activity.
Okay.
I couldn't give a blanket statement for all situations, because obviously I'd have to assess, everything has different nuances, if that makes sense. But I think you've got to really look at it at that economic activity level, and I think in the majority of charity cases there would be some sort of economic activity occurring.
Okay, great, thank you.
No worries.
Oh, well, Florence, I don't know if I can't see any more hands up, and there's no more comments in the chat, so
I'd run while you can.
Yeah. I
No
think
worries.
you're
Thank you.
free to go.
Thank you all.
We really appreciate it. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you for having me, and I hope you all have a lovely time listening to Samantha's presentation. But yeah, thank you so much. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
That does bring me nicely on to introducing my lovely colleague Sam.
And I hope too that you all enjoy my presentation. But do put your hands up or just button if you have any questions as we go along. So continue on the theme of welfare of animals in transport. We are, for myself, we're just going to be looking at the England regulations versions of WATO, because we are within England and it does change very slightly within Scotland and Wales. So there's slight changes there which we don't enforce down in Devon and Somerset. So there on the front slide are the main legislations that we look at when we're dealing with situations ourselves within our service. So you've got the Welfare of Transport, England Order 2006, and we also look at the Animal Health Act 1981. And because of the WATO coming from the EU, you've also got the Council Regulation 1 2005. So the first bit, we're going to be just looking at these three main areas. So we're going to look at which legislations are involved and what is involved with that legislation, because if we know what the legislation and the requirements that are there that we need to comply with, then we know what we need to do and what we shouldn't do. Well, that's the plan anyway. And then we're going to look at how to comply the legislation with what we're doing, so how it works with us in actual farming industry. That with the welfare and transport, the other areas that we could look at, like Nom mentioned about dogs, and we've also said about horses and equine. These legislations mention lots of different animals and can be involved in many things, but we're just going to mainly deal with farming and how it's involved and complies within the farming community. And then we're just going to look at some documents and what we need to carry around with us and what we need to be compliant with the legislation and all of that. Okay, so the law here is, the important thing is, what's the definition of an animal? We need to know what the legislation relates to, and for that we have to look at the Animal Health Act, and it involves and it deals with all vertebrate animals and cold-blooded invertebrate animals. So this legislation deals with any vertebrate animal and cold-blooded invertebrate animal. So it complies with your cattle, your sheep, your dogs, your pigs, your chickens, your fish, your horses, your dogs, your cats, your hamsters, anything and everything that complies with those two categories, then this law does relate to them. So these are some of the conditions which are in the legislation which we have to comply with. So we've got the necessary arrangements to have and to be made in advance. The animals need to be fit for the journey. The means of the transport needs to be suitable. The loading and unloading facilities need to be adequately designed, constructed, maintained and operated. The person handling the animals are trained and competent. The transport is carried out without due delay and place of destination. The welfare condition of the animals are regularly checked. Sufficient floor area, height is suitable and all of that. And you've got your water and your feed and your rest. So with these, it's kind of common sense for what people are doing anyway, but this is what is documented. So you want to make sure your animals are fit for the journey. No one wants to do a journey where the animal is going to be caused any injury, suffering or death by the end. The idea of transporting the animal is either to sell it, to breed it, or to take it to slaughter for end of production. You want to have a suitable transport. So you want to be transporting the animal in a size container that's suitable for it. So you wouldn't want a great big blue bull in a tiny little sheep trailer. It's not going to fit, and it is definitely going to come out injured at the other end or during the transport. So you also wouldn't transport a goldfish in a cattle lorry. It's not going to survive without the water of a container or a bag. So you want to have a suitable form of transport for the age, the species and the size of animal that you are transporting. You want to be able to load and unload the animal onto the form of transport. So depending on the vehicle, you're going to need maybe a ramp of some sort, Or if you are transporting poultry, you want to be able to catch the bird and place it into the carrier. So you'd want a door on the carrier that's suitable and easy for you to open and close. And you'd want the same sort of thing for like a cat carrier. You'd need to be able to open and close that safely to put the animal in and out. You wouldn't want to have someone transporting cattle if they've never even seen or met a cattle before. So you need to have someone that's trained in how to handle the animals, but also how they're trained like with the competencies to know how to drive with animals on their vehicle. If they've never driven a lorry before with animals, then they're not going to be suitable for transporting animals for yourself. And the transporting without due delay is the fact that you don't want the animals sitting on the lorry for 7 hours before you've even left the departure to get to the destination. So you want them to get on with the journey. As soon as the animals are loaded, you want them to get on the road and carry on. Depending on the journey length, it would depend on if the animals need even checking during the length of journey. If you are going just 10 minutes down the road, you don't necessarily need to stop. Quite often now, a lot of people have cameras so they can keep a visual eye on the animals that they're transporting. But it's not necessary to stop if you're doing a short journey. But if you were doing a longer journey, so like over your 8 hours and you were an authorization 2, then obviously there would be requirements for stops and checks on that. The sufficient floor space and height just means that the size of the area just needs to be relevant to the animals that are on board. So if you have sheep, then you need to be able to have space on the floor for them to all lay down at the same time, but also you want them to be able to stand in a natural position. So they don't need to be arched down or have their backs rubbing against the top surface of a roof or a floor if it's a double decker. So you want the animals to be able to stand in a natural position, but also to be able to lay down if required. Water and feed and rest. As often as the animals need it and it's suitable, like we said, it just depends on the length of time that you're transporting these animals for. So with this one, it's the general provisions of the protection of animals during transport. So these are some offences that we do a lot of work on, and these are the main things we kind of look at. So it's an offence to transport any animal in a way which cause or is likely to cause injury or unnecessary suffering to that animal. So if you know how you're going to drive, or there's a strong likelihood of that animal being caused an injury, or the suffering to that animal is unnecessary to that animal, then it would be an offence under these regulations. It is also an offence to transport an animal except in such reputant or means of transport under conditions in particular with regards to space, ventilation, temperature and security, and with such supply of liquid or oxygen as are appropriate for the species considered. So again, like we spoke before, the condition of the vehicle or means of transport has to be suitable for the animal that you are travelling. If you're, for consideration there with the oxygen side of things, if you're transporting fish, they need to be in liquid and they need a suitable amount of liquid to the oxygen level in their container or bag. But also for livestock, you need to have ventilation in there because and that changes with conditions of temperature of the outdoor environment. So obviously in the winter it's colder, but you still need ventilation. And then the summer, when you've got a lot of heat, you need a lot more ventilation going in there. And that will increase depending on how many animals you've got transporting at that time as well. So you just need to take these considerations because it is an offence if you don't follow these regulations and you do go against what is required of you. So these are just a few things that an inspector, so training standard officers can deal with and can enforce if they find problems. So quite often, training standards with the police, we do roadside stops. So we will get the police to stop livestock vehicles, and then during those stops, we are checking these kind of things. So these are the kind of things that we can do. So we can prohibit a transport, so we can stop someone from transporting any animals further. We can specify conditions that the animals are transported in. So if we find animals that are injured or aren't fit for transport but have to be carried on with that journey, then we can put specific conditions on that. So that could be that the animal has to be in a separate partition, it has to be bedded, or a distance, or where the animal can next go. So instead of it maybe going from Exeter to Scotland, we can say actually we're going to put a 40-kilometre restriction on that animal because it's not healthy, it's not fit enough to go any further than that. Requirements for the journey to be completed, or if the animal is to be returned to the place of departure. So we can put requirements on that to stop the animals from going too far, or to say it needs to go and complete the journey if for some reason the journey is not being completed within that certain time. It's all just to try and stop the animal from suffering any further. So we want to, so we can say to the driver of the vehicle, you need to go and complete your journey within this certain time, or we can, like it says, make them turn around and go back to where they came from if that's maybe closer or a safer or a better place for the animal to be unloaded if there is a problem. We can also ask for the animals to be unloaded, watered, fed and rested if we deem that that's a necessary requirement. And while they're being rested, we can have them accommodated in different areas, identified and a notice served. If the animals are really suffering and there's major issues going on within that animal on that journey or animals, then we can have the animals humanely killed and slaughtered. We can also request that the means of transport or container is repaired or replaced if it's not suitable for the rest of that journey or before it's even picked up an animal. So if we saw them at a livestock market, we can put a notice on that vehicle to say that it's not fit to transport livestock until certain measures or repair has been done. And that it would have to be checked by us before they can then transport livestock again. So we can identify animals. So if there's specific issues, we can identify the animals with a spray mark. It doesn't state how we mark the animals. We could do it because with sheep, there's obviously farmers mark them depending on what medication or if the ram's been in with them. So the law doesn't state we have to put a red dot on their back because there could already be a red dot on their back. So we can put a dot on them, we can put a cross on them, we could sign them if we wanted to, or even draw a Union Jack on if we really chose to. But generally, we wanted to keep it quite simple and easy to identify, but we need to be able to identify that animal or animals if we want to mark them in any way. We can have copies of any of the documentations that driver or that farmer has. So like Florence was saying, you need to have your documents with you, and it would be on request of an inspector, and that would be a local authority, so a training standards officer. So if we request to see those documents, your animal transport documents and your certificate of competencies and your authorization, your movement licenses and all of that, we would be requiring to see those documents to check, and even your driving license, just to make sure you are who you say you are, but also to prove that you actually have a license to drive. And an inspector, so a training standards officer, may serve on the owner or any person appearing to them to be in charge or control. So a notice required to him to take any action. So it just depends on what the inspector deems as necessary, and that notice would tell the farmer or the driver or the haulier what is complied on him and what action they need to take. Any questions so far? I can't see the chat. Is there anything there, Nikki?
No, you're all good to go, Sam. I haven't seen any questions pop up so far.
All right. Well, that's the most boring parts of, hopefully, of my presentation. That's all like the legislation, the lot of wordy bits. So if I've still got you all awake, that's all brilliant. So we have some pictures. So we're just going to go through this. So things to think about when you're going for a journey, when you're transporting any animal, it doesn't matter for how long or what type of species or how many of them. There are certain things before you even load your first animal you need to think about. So you need to think about the temperatures, the weather outside. Is there a weather warning? Is there I don't know, is there high winds? Is it going to be frosty? Is it really like, well, we could only dream. Is it really going to be hot? Are you going to have a really sunny day? Is it worth driving in the middle of the day, or is it worth driving first thing in the morning or in the evening, maybe when it's a bit cooler? Or is it worse to drive first thing in the morning because you could have the snow and the frost on the ground and the roads could be dangerous? You also want to drive the most direct route to your destination. So if you were going from, and you needed to go from Exeter, because that's where I am and that's going to keep coming up, Exeter to Manchester, then you don't want to go via London because that's not the direct route. You need to go straight there, no turning off to anything else, but you do need obviously your routine stops if you need to get fuel in for yourself and all of that. You also want to try and keep to the main roads. So instead of going all the little back roads, which will be windier, maybe less maintained, so you could have a lot more potholes, it could be bumpier, it wouldn't be as smooth a ride for those animals as going on the motorways. So obviously if you're going to a farm, they're not going to be on the motorways, so you are going to have to do some of the country lanes, so it's just choosing the most suitable roads and the best roads for you, your vehicle, and most importantly for your animals that you're transporting. Okay. So we're just going to have a look at some vehicles and then we'll move on to some animals just to get an idea of putting all of that into practice. So obviously we can look at this vehicle here. It's a big lorry, it's an Arctic lorry. It's designed here to transport cattle. It's not necessary to be transporting sheep or pigs because of the ventilation. You can see on the top right picture is the ventilation are along the top. If it was for sheep or smaller animals, you would expect to see the ventilation part way down as well. So you'd have ventilation coming in at them at nose height. With it being higher up, if you had sheep in there, especially on a hot day, you're more than likely to get some animals overheating. So you just need to bear those kind of things in mind. The thing I like about this lorry is that there is a partition part way. So you can block off the animals from the front and the back. So that way, if you do stop suddenly, your animals aren't going to go thrown from the front right to the back or vice versa, from the back to the front. It separates them so the animals can't run up and down so much and move around. It just secures them a lot more and spreads out the weight evenly into your vehicle. You've also got a nice ramp there with some decent grip and some side gates there to protect them so they go and to hurdle the animals up in through the ramp and into the lorry, and for them hopefully not to then fall off the sides. This is a lorry that we didn't approve and we did put a notice on at a livestock market. It was intending to load up with cattle that day at the livestock market. So we issued them a notice and this lorry had to be corrected, mended, before it was able to be transporting cattle. The issues there we found, the big picture on the left, there was a great big holes, routinely quite a few of them going through the lorry, where there was holes where animals could get there, maybe a body part of some sort stuck through there and injured and caught on the sharp edges. On the top right, part of the side of the wall at the top was coming off. It wasn't secured at all. The bottom right is actually the roof. Part of the roof had actually fallen down and was coming into the vehicle. So obviously there was no protection there for the animals. It was dangerous. It was falling apart. It wasn't maintained very well at all. And there was a strong chance an animal could suffer unnecessarily if transported in that vehicle. So that was permitted and stopped from transporting livestock. We do get some little trailers. So this one doesn't look the most glamorous, but was okay. The only issue we had concerns of was on the right hand side. You can see the top of the ramp as it goes into the actual animal area, is that there was a bit of a gap between the ramp and the flooring of the trailer. So there was just some concerns there with regards to a sheep or a pig or a calf or anything small could get their feet stuck down that bit there. So we just gave them some advice on some maintenance and to have something that goes over that gap, so it was safer for the animals to go on and off. And here we have a standard lorry for transporting poultry. So in each of these different crates, these different coloured crates, are poultry inside there. So quite often there won't be any sheets or anything down the side of this. This would be how they are and how you see them going up and down the motorways. It's so the birds get as much ventilation as they can going through, because they can overheat very quickly. So they don't need to have protection on the side. But if it was very wet, we had lots of rain, then there would be a top sheet to stop the water and the rain going down through the poultry crates. And depending on the temperature, if we had a really cold day, then they would have sheets down the side to keep the birds warm. But most of the time you will see them like this, and there will be and then you'll see the birds quite happily. They'll be laid down, but the ventilation and the air will be flowing through, and that's what we would be looking at. Here was another trailer in a livestock market. Generally on the outside looked absolutely fine, but we just saw some bits where it was starting to come apart. So the big picture on the left, you can see that the metal work's coming apart. The maintenance there isn't quite so good. And on the top right hand picture, actually the flooring of the trailer was wooden, and it had completely rotten out at the back right hand corner. So actually this one again was stopped from transporting any animals away from the market, because an animal could easily have fallen through, or a leg could have fallen through there. So again, it was unfit. It was an unsuitable container for transporting animals. So just a little bit of a warning, the next few slides are going to be pictures of animals and things that we would look at as a training standards officer, maybe at a market or a collection centre or on farm, or during some form of roadside stop if we saw the animals, things we would consider as potentially an issue. So if you don't like graphic images, they're not that bad in my mind, but we see quite a few things. So it's just a warning that if you do want to take a couple of minutes away, then please do so. So these things here, so we've got foot rot up in the top picture, and then at the bottom here we've got some very overgrown feet. So here we've got the livestock should be transported in a way which doesn't cause any pain, injury or suffering. Livestock need to be able to stand naturally and on all 4 feet. That's if they've got 4 feet. If it's a bird, obviously they're going to have 2. They're not, if they can't grow an extra couple of feet. So they need to stand naturally. They need a better weight on all their feet. If they can't, there's an issue there. we're not veterinary surgeons at Trading Standards, so we don't deem to be experts in everything and within veterinary concerns. So the main thing is, if you think you have an issue with your animals, that you need to get veterinary advice. If there's any concern, if you think there is a problem, you need to seek veterinary advice for to see if they can deem if the animal is fit or not fit for transport. So with these things, if the animals can't weight bear, we would be looking at putting conditions on their transport in their travelling. So it would be things like how far they can travel, do they need to travel, do they need extra bedding, can they be separated from, like, put on their own or just with one other for company. So those are the kind of things we'd be looking at, putting restrictions onto their movement. It could also be that actually we deem that they are not fit for travelling at all, and we may have to have them humanly destroyed in like a market or collection centre or on farm. So this one here, this sheep here, was at a market and it had black udder. So that means that the udder had a bacterial infection and had partly died off. So it's the same animal in both pictures, just one picture is from the underside, where you can see where it's all died off. So again, we're not a vet, we would be seeking to get veterinary advice ourselves from an APHA vet, and get them to come out, or to get a market to call their own private vet out, or the farmer would have to get their vet out to deem if that was fit for transporting and to carrying on with its journey. If not, that would have to be put down in market. It just depends on, like, every animal we see, there's a different personal circumstances. No two animals we see anywhere is exactly the same, because it depends on severity of the injury or disease that they may have, or the age of them, the strength, the weakness of the animal. So all those things each case has to be taken on a case-by-case basis. So this is why we can't say a blanket all animals that are not bearing 100% weight on all feet can't be transported. There's obviously times where an animal may need to be transported on welfare grounds, maybe like for the Somerset Plain flats being flooded, they'd have to transport the animals away or they're going to drown. Or it could be that they need to go to a vet for veterinary treatment for that issue. So some things like that would be a necessary transport. So with this bull, obviously you can see some marks down its side here. So we wouldn't necessarily say this is we wouldn't say this animal's unfit for transport, but it would make us concerned where these injuries have come from. So if we saw this like at an abattoir, we would be concerned if this was injuries in the trailer, or if the animal been transported with, say, horned cattle, and maybe it wasn't reared or raised with other horned animals. So if it lived in a field with these horned animals all its life, then they could be transported together. But if it was only loaded with these horned animals for the purpose of this journey, then that's not suitable, because horned and unhorned animals can't go together just at that time of transporting. So it would be fit enough for transport, but we would want to know what happened to make these marks. Was it just something happened on farm? Was it something that happened during the transport? Was there any sharp edges and that on the lorry? So we'd just have to look into that, but it doesn't stop the animal from being transported. Cows with full udders. So a cow needs to be milked before it's transported. Obviously, if it's a dairy cow, not a beef cow. But anything with a full udder would need to be relieved of that fullness to make it comfortable for its journey. And just like the sheep with cattle, they can sometimes get long hooves. So again, we just need to see if they can stand on all 4 feet, if they can walk evenly on all their feet, and if they're comfortable. So you want to see that they can withstand the movement of a vehicle and the journey, or if they would have to just keep laying down and wouldn't be able to stand, they wouldn't be fit then to have that journey and to go along. So depending on the situation, depends on what action we will put in place. But with these legislation, we can put restrictions on bedding, the length of journey, where they go to, if we actually then just go, they're just going back home, which then would put that farm back on a movement restriction because of the animals moving back. So those are the kind of things we'd be looking at. If they were really severely bad or anything, we'd have to look at further action. But we could again call in a private vet at the market, the farmer's vet, or a vet from APHA to come and have a look at that if we need necessary. So sometimes we see pigs with hernias. So it depends on each situation and each animal. It depends on the size. It depends if there's a risk of it popping or bursting. It would depend on the risk and where they were going to, what was the reason for it, have they been provided with plenty of bedding. You wouldn't want any animal with a hernia to be transported with anything else in its area, just because there's more of a risk than if they lay down for something else to stand on it. So you just have to take all these conditions into consideration when you're thinking about if you're going to transport an animal that's got something like this. The best thing to do is to have your own private vet come to your farm, check these animals if you have any concerns or questions. Are they fit? Are they suitable? And are they healthy enough to go on that journey? And then your vet would be able to check these animals out. They would be able to write you a certificate or a letter to accompany the animal to say that they are fit for that journey. And then within 24 hours, you can carry out that journey and it should be okay, because you'd be going on that veterinary's advice. If it was going to an abattoir, you'd also speak to the abattoir vet, the OV, and say to them, my vet's been out, they've seen the animal, they deem that it's fit to come for that purpose of that journey to the abattoir. And then you'd have that discussion, and as long as the OV and the abattoir are happy to take it, your vet's happy to say that it is fit for transport, then that's your due diligence of taking all reasonable precautions to make sure the animal is fit and well and there shouldn't be any issues. So here are some documents that you may require depending on what animal you are transporting. So your animal transport document would be for any commercial business, where it would document the date, what you're traveling, how many, where you're picking them up from, where you're dropping them off to, the length of journey and that kind of thing. You'd have your licenses, you'd have passports, well, you would do if you had cattle or horses, your food chain information form. I know it's on some of the licenses, but you wouldn't have that if it was on the if you had cattle. Your certificate of competency, your transport authority, if you need that, and if you need a level 1, a type 1 or a type 2, and you'd need your driving license for driving. So journey times. So in the legislation, it tells you the maximum amount of journey times depending on the species and age of the animal. So it's just worth knowing if you are doing longer journeys, just to check what animal you are transporting and comparing, seeing how old they are, and what requirements are with that, and then obviously with how long you can travel them. And then they'd maybe need a rest period before you can then travel them on again. So I'm not going to go through all of these individually. You can just have a little look and just see there for yourself what you think is suitable for your kind of industry that you're working in. And also there, just to note that a rest period after the maximum amount of time, so say with the piglets, if you did 9 hours and then you rested and then you did a further 9 hours, after that they have to be unloaded. They have to be fed and watered and rested for at least 24 hours before you go again. So those kind of things would be if you were doing journeys over to Europe or other countries. Not necessarily something that would be happening if you were within the England.
Oh, sorry, Sam, just to butt in. I've got Naomi with her hand up.
Go on, what have you got to say?
Hello, Sam. I just have one quick question that I'd about the rest thing. What do they actually, is the rest period, is that literally the vehicle just pulls over and is stationary, or does the transporter have to provide anything for the animals? Or
so in those rest periods where, like say the unweaned calves, you've got your 9 hours and then your one rest, so that rest doesn't necessarily mean they have to be unloaded then. It just means they have to be stopped. I think they have to rest for like an hour. That the vehicle has to stop for an hour. They don't have to be unloaded, from what I can remember. Those kind of things would be something I would double check. But they have to be rested, watered, and fed. So they have to have a visual check and all of those kind of things done. But I don't believe they have to be unloaded then. It's only after that extra 9 hours, then they have to be completely unloaded, rested, given 24 hours complete. Whereas before then, like if it was one of those longer journeys, if it was pigs, they would already have automatic water drinkers in the lorry anyway. But for other livestock, there wouldn't necessarily be water, so they have to be checked and provided with some sort of food and substance.
Thank you.
Is that all right? Anything else?
Thank you. No, not yet. No.
There'll be some in a minute. I'm near the end, don't worry. I'm near the end. So the EU a few years ago made up and worked together to make these fact sheets to help all farmers or hauliers that transport animals throughout Europe. And they made these fact sheets for all the different countries and languages. So here is just a link to them, and they are just really useful. There's videos for people to watch about how to load different species, unload them, how to check that they're fit for transport, about road conditions and weather conditions and planning things. So I definitely recommend that you go on these. You can watch the videos and guides, or you can print off or request the fact sheets to be given to you. And then you can see what is relevant to you and what animals you have. And it's just, I believe when these first came out, big hauliers and that got sent the guidance and the information for their drivers all to be given these kind of fact sheets, because it's just a nice little, what would they call, an idiot guide on what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. So it's quite obvious in these videos and these fact sheets what you're looking for, and it's a nice little reminder to put in the side of your door or with your other documents, and then it's a nice refresher of what you should or shouldn't be doing. So you can go online and have a look at them in your leisure. Also, for some other farming advice and support, Heart of the Southwest Trading Standards have some fact sheets and some information on our website. So there is a link there So we can send that out if anyone wants it afterwards. So you can go on there. There's all sorts of different farming advice. There's movement books, and there's medicine books, and there's information about feed registration and everything else, but also about the welfare of transporting animals. So you can have a look there, and there's all sorts of things and guidance for any farmer to need. So again, the main things we looked at. So we looked at the legislation, what you need to know for what it complies with, and to make sure that you don't breach anything. We looked at how to put that into practice. So we went through all the pictures, and we looked at what would we be looking at to be unfit for transport, looked at the different vehicles to see what wouldn't be suitable, and then we just had a quick look at what documentation and what information there and what support is there as well. Any questions?
Oh, that was brilliant, Sam. I think it's reminded me of some of the things that, just informative and giving me lots more pointers and reminders, really. Oh, I think Naomi has popped her hand up.
Hi, Naomi.
Hello, Sam. That was a really brilliant presentation. Thank you. Like Nikki, I've had a massive refresher now on what to look out for and what advice to give. I just have a couple little questions, if you don't mind.
No, carry on.
One is about the use of tarpaulin and whether that's a suitable, because I think you have to provide in transport protection from the weather.
Yeah.
So a tarp as a roof, and whether that would be, you sometimes see that on the smaller trailers, don't you? Whether that would be suitable.
We used to see a lot more sort of homemade trailers sort of put together. There isn't anything in the legislation that says what the roof, what the protection is made of. There's nothing specific to say that is or isn't allowed. I think it would have to be, is it safe, is it secure? As much as you want it to protect the animals from the weather, you also don't want the animals to escape, jump out over the top. And if you were going down the motorway and that's flapping, and actually it's causing more noise or stress to the animal, that's not going to be suitable. But also you don't want it to be loose, that the animals can actually jump out and cause an accident and cause some sort of road collisions. So I think if there was maybe some metal mesh and that was over the top of that and securely down, and it didn't flap around or move, then I don't think that we would necessarily be able to find an offence with that.
Because sometimes they come with a custom, quite a thick cover, don't they? But it is a fabric, a waterproof that's hooked on with rope around the sides. And I think that it's sometimes when that's maybe broken or doesn't, there's that come to the end of its life, but there's nothing wrong with the trailer, that you might be sort of inclined to make your own out of a tarpaulin or something.
And I think things like that would have to go case by case basis on the fact of, is it suitable for the purpose? Is it fit for purpose? Is it safe? What's the purpose it's meant to be, and is it doing that? Are the animals being caused any suffering by the noise, vibrations, or be scared of it? That's not going to help anyone. And is it protecting them from the weather, but also is it stopping? That's the main thing, to stop them from jumping out, or injury? So I don't think there's a blanket yes or no. It would be depending on the makeup of that.
It's the safety, isn't it? I guess
sorry, there's no real clear yes or no, which is the same for really most of the legislation we cover with anything. It is case by case basis.
Isn't it?
It really is.
And just one more thing, which you might have covered, but I did miss a bit at the beginning, was just about cleansing and disinfecting the vehicles. And
actually, I didn't cover any of that.
I just thought it might sort of tie in, as you've spoken a lot about vehicles and stuff.
You should have done this instead of me. No,
you are fabulous at it.
So what Norman's saying there is, obviously there's requirements with the disease control of things, that all vehicles need to be cleansed and disinfected with DEFRA approved disinfectant. That is the reason it mainly came out from foot and mouth, like back in 2001 with that outbreak, just to try and reduce the risk of disease being spread from farm to farm and being transported and spread around the country. So the idea is that your trailers and vehicles of any type, doesn't matter what you've transported them in, if an animal's gone in it, you need to be able to clean it out. So in between all your journeys that is off a farm, you need to be able to take out all the muck, all the bedding, and you need to wash it down and then spray in and clean it with some disinfectant approved from DEFRA for the purpose of those animals and that diseases that you're trying to cover. So you need to do that every time. So if you go to and from a livestock market or a collection centre or an abattoir, you need to be able to clean and disinfect your trailers and your lorries or any other form of vehicle that you're using. This is where it all gets really complicated, isn't it? So if you go somewhere like a livestock market or an abattoir, an abattoir you'd have to do it, a collection centre, you have to fill out then a C&D, a cleanse and disinfectant declaration, to say that if you're not going to wash it out there and then at the market, for example, then you will need to do it at home within 24 hours and before you use that vehicle to then transport any of your animals on farm again. It's just trying to stop from any diseases of where you've been to going back to your own livestock at home for you to have an outbreak of anything there. So if you had a trailer and you were just moving some animals around your own farm, you don't have to cleanse and disinfect in between those movements. So if you were just moving some cattle or some sheep from one field to another, and it was just your own animals on your own premises, you don't need to worry about it then, unless you want to. But before you leave the farm, you need to make sure you've got a clean vehicle. And when you return from anywhere where you've been traveling animals off your farm, you need to make sure you've got a clean vehicle again before you transport any more livestock. It's just protecting your own animals and just making sure that there's no chances of disease coming back to your holding or reducing the chances, and just trying to keep your own stock as healthy as you possibly can. It's also a really good way of then checking to make sure your vehicle is in a good maintenance. So it's making sure, if it's always covered in bedding and poo everywhere, then you're not going to be knowing if actually the flooring is rotting at the bottom or there's a sharp edge or an injury or something's broken. So you just need to have real good condition and maintenance of your vehicles. Does that answer that, Namski?
Yes, that's brilliant. Thank you, Sam. Really well done again. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, all that kind of information is on our website and in our fact sheets. So please do go and have a look at our website. As much as people seem to think trading standards are here just to prosecute and find things wrong, we really do want to just provide business support and help the farming community. So there is so much information on our website, and it's all there just to try and make it easy for anyone to access it. There's no questions asked, just go and have a look, see what's relevant to you and what helps you. Any more questions from anybody?
Well, I can't see anything else in the chat, Sam, and there's nobody with any more hands up, so that was amazing. Loads and loads of information, and I think it will be beneficial to everyone that listens back to this recording as much as the people here this evening, so thank you very much for doing that. Next we have Luke. Are you there, Luke, and are you happy just to give us a quick rundown of the Future Farm Resilience and where we're at?
Yeah, happily. So just a reminder that this webinar series that we run, we work with Trading Standards and it's funded through the Future Farming Resilience Programme, which is providing free farm business support to farm businesses and land managers across the Southwest. So if you're a farm business or a land manager in Cornwall, Devon, Dorset or Somerset, there's free support available in the form of the 5 options on the screen there. So there's workshops and one-to-one support and webinars like this, in which you can access the answers to the questions you've got. I think something that's quite topical, which I'll share right now is will be announcements about SFI 24 following the shortly before the general election. DEFRA shared a lot of new guidance on SFI. I think it's worth just sharing a few highlights that we've been able to suss out from the updates. So SFI 24 will incorporate mid-tier countryside stewardship. So this will mean that some of the actions will be for a 5-year term in the SFI agreement alongside a majority of 3-year actions. So some of the previous 5-year actions are mid-tier, such as maintaining a weatherproof traditional farm or forestry building, are now 3-year actions. And some actions will now require what's called endorsement. So some actions like this will be something like the managed priority habitat species rich grassland, which is GRH6. That will require Natural England approval in order to be taken on as an action under your SFI action plan. There's more endorsed actions that are going to be coming later in 2024. Educational access will also be available for SFI in the future as well. And applications under SFI 23 are still being accepted until SFI 24 is open to all. This is expected to be at some point in July. It's unlikely to be until after the election because with no new information coming out from DEFRA until after the election, it's unlikely there'll be any action. We have quite regular conversations with DEFRA through this programme, but they're being very tight-lipped, understandably, with the imminent news of the election next month. So there's only 6 months left of this free support. So if you've been umming and erring as to whether you ought to take it up, whether you ought to get an advisor out to farm or not, I really just encourage you to get on the helpline. There's a phone number on the bottom right corner of the screen there, and make the most of the support while we've got it for the next 6 months. We don't know what the future of this programme will be just yet. Hoping that DEFRA will share an announcement on something promptly following the election. But yeah, there's a lot of support available still. A team, loads of different agri-advisors from all those different companies listed down the bottom there. All local advisors here to support local farm businesses and land managers. So if you've got any questions, do reach out. Otherwise, yeah, that's it from me on the Future Farming Resilience Programme. We've got any questions?
I don't think we have, Luke. I can't see any hands up or any questions in the chat. So thank you for doing that. It's always great to have a 5-minute, 10-minute recap on where we are with the Future Farm Resilience and things that's happening, because it moves on quite a fast pace, doesn't it, sometimes, and knowing kind of what's next in line. So as Luke mentioned, we have got the series of webinars still going. They're still one a month until December, and each month we're trying to touch on some different topics. If there's anyone on the chat, anyone on the call this evening, or if anyone listens to this later and has any topics that they would like us to cover, obviously we're generating speakers on a monthly basis, but if there's anything that anyone can think that would be beneficial to them or to the farming industry, then we would really like to hear from you, because we'd really like to know. We want to aim it for people that can get the most out of these while we've got the funding to deliver them. So yeah, don't have to say now, but yeah, if you've got time to contact us, or you listen and are able to get in touch and let us know if there's any topics that you'd like us to cover, that would be really appreciated. The next one is going to be in July, and we are covering a speaker from Rabbi, and also Farmerados. That's 2 confirmed speakers for the next webinar. Is that somebody got their hands up? Sorry, I can't see. Tracy.
Hi. Yes.
Hi.
As a farmer.
Yeah.
Just wondering what the guys from Trading Standards and APHA are seeing at the moment during the transition from BPS to FFR, given the economics of farming currently. Is it the same? Is it getting worse? Are you noticing more issues, or do you feel it's business as usual?
Do you mean where we're going now from the money that you used to get as a single farm payment kind of process? And there was obviously the we used to go out with vets to do cross compliance visits. So obviously as a local authority, and we used to obviously work alongside AFA, then they're obviously with the scheme that was in place at that point, you obviously had conditions that you had to adhere to, and obviously if they weren't met, say like you failed to tag your animals correctly or anything like that, then there was a grade where you then got, obviously you could be penalised and some of your payment removed. In terms of the new system, I would say as officers that's something that we have raised as a bit of a concern, and at the moment I'm not 100% sure that there is an answer as to how we're going to regulate that, because obviously like I say, with that kind of process in place, that hasn't been announced as to how we're going to move forward and how we're going to keep tabs on that. There's a couple of other trading standards officers on the call, but I don't. Do you know, Sam, of whether we've?
I don't know if you're Tracy, if you're trying to think of are we seeing more farming issues, more welfare with the animals or with the farmers? Is that the kind of thing you're thinking?
Concern all the machinery, because the money's not there to keep it.
Yeah, it is a concern for us, because the farming world is such a hard industry. It's not easy. It's the only one I kind of know of that you get told how much you're buying everything in for and how much you're going to sell everything for. It's not an easy business to have, whereas like if you made staircases, you'd be able to price it up yourself and tell the consumer what you're going to charge them. So it is a really hard industry, and we completely get that, and that's why we want to do these like webinars and things, and try and show and try and help the farming industry and stop them from thinking that Trading Standards is just here to prosecute. We are here as a business support, and we do have a lot of we do work within this project with a lot of different charities, and try and signpost farmers to where they can get help, like from Rabbi, from FCN, from NFU, there's loads of smaller charities and things that are there to help farmers. There was a feed one recently. I can't remember. And Nikki, you know that one, don't you? That help with farmers if they're just really struggling to feed their animals.
Oh yeah, like Forage Aid.
Forage Aid, that's it. But also about how to help the farmers with like the food bank, how they can get help in, how they can get some social care or something for an elderly relative that's still living with them on farm. So it's all these other things that we want to try, and the whole reason these projects and this wellbeing rural support and wellbeing project came out is around COVID time. We were realizing we were going out to farms, we were seeing more and more issues back then. We found problems with the animals, but we never felt like we were coming away fully helping the farmer. And if you can help the farmer, most of the time then the conditions on farm improve and get better, because the farmers want to do their best for their animals, but if they can't feed themselves or pay the electric bill, it's really hard for them to then go and repair the fencing or do a new roof on a barn or something. So I really do get where you're coming from with all these cuts and all these like government decrease in how much money they're getting. The prices of everything else is still going up, and where they're going to get that difference of money that's no longer coming into them and there's still money going out even more, I'm not quite sure. So we do predict there's going to be more issues and more concerns and more complaints we're going to receive. But we just hope that the farming community realise we are here to help as well. And we do have all that information on the website. We do have citizens' advice and things. And we are here. And there is, on our website, we've got a whole list of different charities that people can go to and get help. If they don't know who to go to, we do have a lot of information on our website, so they can go to that to hopefully then, because it's not knowing where to go to and who you can contact. So I'm sorry, that's a bit of a mouthy explanation, but we are aware of it. Can't stop the cuts of support, the funds there, but hopefully through these future farm resilience schemes, and it may help, it may not, but we are concerned as well with you.
Yeah, that's good, because really having the charities there is great, but you've been set up to fail, haven't you? That's
And the farmers are proud people. They really are proud people, and to ask for help is a really big thing. But it's hard to ask for help when you really need it. And it's knowing who to go to, where to go to. There is a lot out there, which sometimes makes it more difficult of which one's the right one. Is there anything you can suggest that we could do to help? Is there anything coming back to us?
I think from just being in the farming community and farming ourselves, and we're obviously in it's a difficult situation at the moment. I've never known it this bad.
Right.
And I was a veterinary nurse. I worked in larger and more mixed practice, so you saw quite a lot different things, but it is that the thing they're saying is the FFR, not the FFR, the SFI, it's working. That is not the feeling we're getting in the farming community. And then because you've been set up and they knew that was probably going to happen, and if you've got to put in a mental health welfare thing from the very beginning, there was things were going to start happening. I think a lot of the farming wives and partners are pushed and getting extra jobs. And we're the ones that do the paperwork. I can't be working and doing the paperwork myself. I can be up to 1-2 o'clock in the morning, then you've got to roll on.
There's only so many hours in the day for you.
Yes, that's it. And there's a lot of paperwork with farming that's never recognised. What's happening, what I found is what's happening in the farmhouse is never accounted for, so it's all outside. And I think some people can be having huge problems like mental health crisis, and sometimes it's the farmer's wife. I was in the NHS and we went to a farm, and the farmer had his wife tied to him with a rope because she had Alzheimer's and he was trying to carry on. And then you guys could come, and I think everybody's more aware about mental health. But back in the day, he would have been massively penalised by your predecessors, because that's not what they were looking for, and that sort of got
so like you said, we are quite a lot of us in our rural team are now trained in mental health awareness, sort of the first aid in mental health now. Like you said, just because it is a big part of the farming now, we've all got mental health, just like our physical health. Some days it's good, some days it's bad. So we are very mindful of that, and I think a lot more now when we are going out, and we do routine visits to farms. So I don't want anyone to think when we call up or you get a letter from us saying we're coming out to visit you, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not because we've had a complaint or major issues, or we're expecting to find lots of problems. It's just because we do have obviously a huge agricultural industry within Devon and Somerset, and the best way for us to come out and provide support and help to the farming community is to come and visit. And we do that to all different businesses, not just farming and not just farms. So when we come out and visit, we are coming out to look to make sure everything's compliant, trying to provide support and help where we can, and trying to come up with different ways of maybe making things better. providing them with support and signposting them to other agencies and support that are out there that we reckon is relevant to their business. Maybe they could diversify, or they're thinking of diversifying or selling products directly from farm instead of going through the big markets.
Sorry to interrupt you. The
That's all right.
projects have been done and done and done and done.
Yeah.
And there's a camping place opposite us, so if we did, you're competing with them. So now, and you don't want to have an income that's farm based. You want it, to me now, you want it something separate that is away from the farm. So if anything goes wrong here, on the farm, you've got a separate income. But then if you're away from the farm, you're not looking after your animals.
It's a really hard thing, and I think that's why we're losing a lot of dairy farmers now, is because maybe they're going off to arable or to beef, or like you said, they're completely diversifying into other things now, just to reduce the amount of restrictions and pressures on them, because obviously dairy farmers are hugely struggling with financials and with time. It's a lot more time restrictive as well for them to be able to go off and do other jobs as well. So we do actually feel, and if you've got any ideas of if there's any future webinars that you'd like us to run and organize, if you can think of anything that we can do that you think actually that information would be really helpful, then we can help with anything of that kind of thing. So our contacts were in that previous slide. I can put it back on at the end, but do get in contact with us. That we're always here to help and to see what else we can do.
I think ultimately it's a shame it's come to this.
It's really hard for us to also come up with different ways of trying to help, because there's only so much you guys can do, and there's really even less that we can do to help.
That's it. And I think it's just difficult everywhere. Everybody's experiencing
but if you are thinking, or if any business is thinking of growing and diversifying into something else, then we do have the Growth Hub, which work for Devon Council, and they can help and provide information about how to improve changing a job, or going on the internet, or accountancies. There's all sorts of different ways that they can help with you diversifying. So there is support there if you need, if you know it's there, if you know where to look for it. But again, that's all on our website. If anyone listening thinks actually I could do with that, it's all there. But just drop Trading Standards an email, or have a look on our website. If there's anything you need help and support with, it's all there. Just get in contact. Don't be shy to ask. What we want to do is support businesses, any business. So if you're wanting to move on from farming, then still get in contact with us, because you are still a business. Trading Standards still cares.
I think it's D-Day today, and if we don't know what those lads are out there fighting for, and including food and being able to feed ourselves, we are heading for a hiding at some point in the near future. We've got to be able to feed ourselves.
Absolutely. And I know from us in our rural team, we really do appreciate the farmers out there and what they do. It's not an easy job, and it's not an easy way of life, and it is 24/7, 7 days a week. It never stops. So we do really appreciate it. Hence why we want to get everyone up to being compliant with legislation, so things run smoothly and everything else.
I think it wouldn't be a bad idea for us to maybe invite the Growth Hub to come and talk at one of these again, just to kind of make people aware of kind of the help, the free advice that you can get additional to what's available on the Future Farm Resilience Programme. And I think Naomi's kindly put in the agricultural support Southwest for business information point as well.
Yeah.
And you can see there that she's put about the link above to sign up to the newsletter, and it gives you a bit like what Luke was talking about earlier, but it gives you all the funds and grants available and an up-to-date version, because there's lots of timings for these kind of things. So you know, they kind of open for applications for a certain length of time and things, so it'd be worth keeping up to date and keep having a look. But that's easily said than done when you're trying to work, you know, millions of hours and keep on top of paperwork and look after family. So I think you can only do so much, but as much as possible, we'll try our best to advertise it and make people aware. I think thank you ever so much though for your contribution, Tracy. I really appreciate it. I think we've got one other hand up. Robin, did you have something that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say to Tracy, I think, I mean, you kind of you covered a lot of ground there. I mean, the initial question was about sort of inspection and how that's kind of working. We're just coming to the end of the SFI pilot now here, having been one of the sort of first people to be involved in it, and we were asked to take part in a desktop in quotes inspection. So this is something that they're trialing with SFI now. So rather than people coming out physically, they're doing a sort of desk-based exercise where they just sort of ask for paperwork and this kind of thing. And actually, I can report back, it was entirely painless, and they were very nice about it, and it was fine. And I think of the sort of 850 of us who were in the pilot for SFI, you know, quite a few have had physical inspections, sort of on-farm visits, and I think, you know, to a man, I think they've had a pretty positive experience. I think DEFRA have had a completely fundamental rethink about how they approach that sort of thing, and it's very much more about what you were talking about with trade standards in terms of advice and guidance and being very sensitive to people's sort of mental well-being, rather than coming in and being, you know, the traditional man from the ministry back in the 50s kind of thing. So maybe that, you know, put your mind at rest a little bit. I think in terms of what I would suggest you do is I would suggest you apply for SFI. I think yeah, I was going to say, you know, because you know, you know, it doesn't take a genius to work out that the way this has been set up is that it's carrot and stick. And so as BPS tapers off, the idea is that it gets harder and harder and harder for people to survive financially on BPS or what remains of it, and it forces them into SFI, and it's been designed that way. And actually they've had a really good take up. You know, I think they've got about 30,000 applications and about 18,000 live agreements now, and there's what 100,000 active farmers in the UK, well, in England, I think. So 30,000 is quite a big proportion. So I think it's having an effect, and you know, that money is coming into the farming community, and you know what we've said to DEFRA all the way along in the sort of years we've been working with them on SFI is, you know, essentially, you know, if farmers don't claim this money, it will be spent somewhere else. You know, if people don't sign up for SFI, then the farming budget will get cut. You know, there's no two ways about it. So, you know, as I say, great to hear you've applied. I hope you're having a really positive experience with it. We certainly have.
No, because we haven't got any money yet, so no, terrible.
But then, you know, you've got to bear in mind it's new to you, you know, and it's easy for me to say and be confident about it because we've been doing it for years, and I totally get that it's all completely new to you. And I would say our experience of when we signed up for the pilot, you know, 3 years ago, having already had 2 years of being talking to DEFRA about it, I would say there was an enormous amount of work it was far more complicated and far more time consuming than to sign up for the original BPS scheme. But once we were in it, it was far easier to manage and it was fine. And I would say, you know, persevere, because I think it's only going to get easier. They keep changing the system. I mean, the system you're using is completely different to the one we used for the pilot, and you know, it's already much better than it was. So yeah, I think, you know, but in terms of sort of you know, mental well-being, as I say, I think, you know, I certainly wouldn't be worried about being inspected on SFI or anything. You know, they've been great. You know, they really have had a change of approach. And I think if you did get an inspection or one of these new desktop things at any time in the future, I'd like to think you'll have the same experience that we've had in the pilot, where, you know, it's very much about just advice and guidance, and, you know, just coming to have a chat and a cup of tea kind of thing.
A better approach.
Yeah,
definitely, because farmers get kicked in the knackers harder than I would if I worked in the NHS and I gave somebody the wrong drug. I know it's a never event, but you do as a farmer. You do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, you know, but I think there is a huge amount of concern, and, you know, I mean, talking about, you know, what we could cover in future things. I mean, there's, you know, everybody in the industry, I think, is really concerned about the health and safety exec rolling back from doing, you know, on-site visits, and quite the effect that will have on, you know, are people going to bother to make, like you said, you know, are they going to bother to maintain equipment? Are they going to bother to do this and do that?
Bothering, but the money's not there to do it.
Yeah.
That's the issue. And people are, older machinery is kept going, things are patched up.
Yeah.
The quad bike goes on longer than what it should. That's the worry, and being able to bring young people in when there is no money is really hard. Something think why you can't pay people to work on the farm. There's youngsters just walking away, going to do other you know, farming's never been well paid, but there's no money, and then farmers to do more on their own, aren't they? And then that's dangerous, because you
absolutely. And the flooding, you know, I don't know whereabouts, you know, obviously, you know, we're on the Mendips, but, you know, our colleagues down on the levels, you know, have really had it bad. So, you know, that's contributed to it. But I think, you know, generally, I mean, as the lady from Trading Standards said, these kind of started in COVID as kind of looking after people's well-being, and I think that's kind of got to be a big tenet of what we try and do moving forward as well.
Yes, I think it was a shame it took COVID to wake things up, though, personally. You know, with regards to your noddle and things like that. I was at one of the vet schools at Foot and Mouth, and there was no counselling service for those students. They didn't think they needed one. They thought they could just roll back in. And sometimes it would be me just sat with them, talking to them and how much they didn't want to be a vet anymore, but they hadn't completed their exams and that sort of thing. And that was a good 20 years ago. And things have changed, but it's taken a hell of a time to recognise issues. But it's good, it's moving forward. But I think things have got to be recognised that's going on in the farmhouse, and mums looking after kids as well as trying to farm is so hard.
No, absolutely. And I would say, you know, I mean, I've said it before to the Trading Standards team here, I think, you know, they are, and particularly what's happening at, you know, Devon County Council have been kind of the beacon of hope for us down in the southwest, because Somerset Council, you know, just been all over the place with going unitary and all this kind of thing. So I think, you know, I total hats off to the Trading Standards team for kind of starting this and continuing with it, because it's kind of the one beacon of kind of you know, work that's going on in this particular area, in pretty much in the whole of the southwest kind of thing. you know, which is great.
Just to add to that, it has been taken to further on. We've got like obviously we then are members of something bigger, which is our TSSW, which is sort of the whole of the Southwest, and then it's also, you know, them being fed up to the national panel. So we're hoping that not just our Southwest area, but moving up the country to try and sort of get all trading standards, you know, more in tune with the rural support and wellbeing area of things. So that's kind of it's an evolving thing at the moment, and also, like, you know, like Sam said, we're just trying our best to kind of change the perception of trading standards as a whole. Obviously, we do have a enforcement hand, and on some cases we are pushed that we have no option but to use it. However, a lot of our you know, our visits now are trying to focus on that kind of rural support aspect of it, and you know, just trying to look at the bigger picture, because whenever you go onto a farm, you know, there is going to be certain issues, there is going to be a few things that, you know, need to be made better or improved or whatever, but it's kind of looking at the farming network as a whole, really, and you know, trying to source what we have as officers available to us, and you know, giving it to the farming community, really.
Yes, no, that's a good thing. But sometimes the farmers are, and I would say we have looked after like kids from the village, maybe that have been having problems. So sometimes we are dealing with kids that have issues, and maybe the police are looking for them sometimes. And so with a bereavement or something like that, and they're coming up to the farm. So it's not just you know, it may not be the farmer or the farmer's wife that's having the problems. They may be dealing with somebody who's coming up, and it's an active, positive, you know, they want to work, basically. There's so much to it, isn't there? And I'm glad.
Yeah, no, we thoroughly have, you know, we, like I say, we're totally recognizing that, and there is you know, that's why we try and go now tooled with a little bit, like we've all got mental health first aid training, and we've all gone tooled with kind of the, you know, trying to understand the bigger picture that's going on in a farming community, rather than just looking like maybe we used to more at the non-compliances kind of thing. So yeah, that's it. Why has it got to the state that it's in, or what, you know, what can we do to kind of support? And like you say, that's why signposting is kind of the basis of our some of our support work, because obviously we are not, you know, mental health trained fully, or we're not, you know, we don't go pretending that we can fix everything, but we do try to kind of support in the right way by, you know, providing that signposting. Quite often I'll ring, like if I'm on farm and we've had a conversation about it, rather than sort of just hand over a leaflet, sometimes I'll say, would you like me to make that phone call for you? You know, even if it's just ringing BCMS and trying to, you know, they've been trying to register a particular animal, or they've got some issues with some paperwork, you know, I'll do my best to try and do it while I'm there, and, you know, give that support, because sometimes we have a different route in to try and you know, rectify what's happening, and yeah, like you say, just try and alleviate that. We've also been doing a lot of work with the rural crime police as well, and the local fire services. So we've been trying to, you know, make it a bit of a, what we've been calling a bit of a farming support hub, so that when we've been at like, you know, agricultural shows and things like that, we're trying to kind of pull all the agencies together, so that when a farming family may approach us about something, if it's something that as a trading standard service we can't you know, we can't help with, the rural crime police may be able to, or the fire service may be able to, or the farming community network group or something like that. So we're trying to pull our support services and government agencies together to try and then, you know, combat this and make it better for farmers in general, really.
Yes, no, that's good in the rural. No, that's good.
Oh, well, I really appreciate your contributions, Tracy and Robin. You know, it's what these webinars are set up for, and hopefully then anyone that listens back can obviously relate to what you're saying. I'm absolutely sure of it. And you know, if every little bit, you know, if there's one or two people that listen in and are helped by it, you know, that's kind of what the basis of our whole reason for doing these things, really. But thank you. I'll keep it very brief because obviously we're up to 8 o'clock and I don't want to keep people over and above the time. But I just wanted to point out about the Hub of Hope that's up on the screen at the moment. And like we say, that's a tool that myself and other trading standards and professionals have been using, and it's if you have time to just you know, Google it or pop it into, you know, any of your search engines, it's easy to navigate, and you can search by postcode, you can search by type of support service you're trying to find, and they're basically linked via sort of, it's all sort of based around mental health and well-being. And yeah, if you just put the postcode in, it brings up to the area of where you live or the person that you're trying to help lives. It just gives you what's available in that area, because we found that it does vary from county or, you know, local authority based, things like that. So different NHSs, different, you know, parts of the NHS, different things like that, is different services available. Sometimes it'll be called TalkWorks in one area, another one and another area will be called something else, but the support services are there, and it's just a really good tool to help you find what you're looking for. And I think that's it. I don't know if there's any more questions. I'm just trying to no, I think that's it. Does anybody else have anything they would like to add? Okay, well, thank you ever so much for attending. If you do have any questions, then please feel free to get in touch with us. There's an email address there which you can feed back through to the Business Information Point team, or a telephone number. But yeah, if there's anything else at all, we will be back again the first Thursday in July. So thank you very much.